This is good old boy Mike from Sips, Suds, and Smokes podcast, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 176, the Cannonball Run movie review. Welcome to the show. I'm Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. Derek Myers, Caveman. How are you, my friend?
Doing well, Chris. Doing real well. How are you this week?
Oh, man, I can't complain. Well, you know, nobody would listen if I did anyway, so we're not here for that. We're here for pop culture. So you usually have a bit more, I don't want to say you have more free time than I do, but, you know, you always have more pop culture stuff because I just keep watching the same things over and over again. So what have you done this week pop culture wise that's new? I mean, educate me. What's out there that I'm missing out on, man?
All right. Okay. I got a few things for you. Good. And these are all older things.
Oh,
so
good.
There's no excuses
right up my alley
as to why you are not familiar with these or have maybe not seen these. In fact, I'd kind of be shocked if you haven't seen them, but I got a few. And of course, we'll have a documentary because I didn't have one last week. So I felt I had a little homework to make up for. So, nice. Okay. First, don't want to talk about this at great length. Just want to acknowledge the movie An American Werewolf in London was on TV last night. So I ended up having to give up 2 hours of my life to watch it again, the original. And it's great. It holds up real well. We'll have to do that on a future podcast. I know you enjoy that movie. So I just wanted to throw that out there to start with.
I'm in love with Jenny Agutter in that movie. That movie is really good. The special effects are good. It's I don't want to say it's campy, but it's almost like over the top, satirical in a way. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, we have.
It's really good, and I love the soundtrack. That it's all the different songs that have the word moon in it, and like they're all sort of different genres and styles, and they're all great songs. So there's a lot to like about that movie. So it was sort of like a guilty pleasure kind of movie. I saw it come on. I thought I should probably go to bed soon. I'm like, I better watch this. So yeah, that was the first one. My wife and I decided the other night we wanted to watch something, and we had a hard time a few nights earlier picking something to watch. We cycled through Amazon, we cycled through Netflix, we cycled through Disney, and we couldn't agree on something to watch. We're like, this is the equivalent of walking through the video store on a Friday night trying to find a movie. Like, we probably spent a good 30 minutes just cycling through all the titles and either saying, nah, I've seen that. Nah, I don't feel like seeing that. Maybe not right now, but in future. So then a couple of nights after that, we said, let's not do that again. Let's just make a short list and pick something. And she said, well, I have about 20 or 30 movies saved in my recorder. Let's watch something. Fine. We ended up picking the Alfred Hitchcock classic from 1964, Marnie, starring Tippi Hedren and Sean Connery. Nice. Neither one of us had ever seen it. I had never even heard of it. Wow. And so we're like, okay. We don't know anything about it other than the cast and that it's Alfred Hitchcock. And my wife, Kay, was like, oh, I heard it's really good. That's why I recorded it. So we went into it not knowing anything about it, and we both loved it. It was great. Have you seen it?
I have. It's been a long time, but it's very, very good. It
is very, very good. And it's almost like two movies. Like at about the midway point, there's like a big reveal, and the movie sort of shifts gears, and it becomes almost a different kind of movie, but in a good way. And we really enjoy it. Again, we won't go into it too much here, but if you're into movies and if you're into Hitchcock and you haven't seen Marnie, it was good. I mean, the acting style from that decade is very different than the acting styles of today, and I find sometimes that throws me a bit. But the story was great, the direction was great. You take for granted how good some directors are, and you just sort of take for granted, like when you watch TV and you watch a lot of modern movies, like things just happen a certain way, and then you watch a film by an actual awesome director like Hitchcock, and you really notice what he brings to the table. Like it was completely obvious to me that the director of this movie was not of the same caliber as the normal director. Like just the way things were shot and things like that. Yeah, it was really, really good. It really held up. 1964 Marnie, give it a look.
Nice.
All right. And then so I have a documentary for you.
For 40 days and 40 nights, he watches documentaries. He likes to learn about the world. It's Derek's Documentaries. Derek's Documentaries.
Before you get into your documentary, I wanted to mention something.
Oh, okay, go.
I had a guest lecturer join me in one of my online classes this week, and he mentioned a documentary that I just got to see, and maybe you've heard of it. It's called Making Fun, and it's the story of Funko. You know those little figures?
Oh, the Funko
with the big,
Pop action figures? Yeah, I've
it's
seen
like
it.
It's the two
great.
guys that, I guess, they founded this company, and kind of how they got it off the ground and everything. Making Fun. Apparently, it's on Netflix. So,
yeah, it's really good. I watched it when it first came out.
Nice.
One of my really good friends is a Funko Pop collector fanatic. He has every Batman that's ever been put out by Funko, and I think he's up to 350 already. It's an obsession with this guy. So
you know which one I want? I want the Fawns.
Nice.
So if anyone out there knows if the Fawns is available in Funko, let me know. Or if you could even send me one, I'll send you some ketchup chips from Canada. So we'll make a trade.
I find the thing with the Funko Pops is they tend to release things in waves, and they only produce a certain number of figures over a certain period of time, and then that's it. They're never available again, and that's part of what makes them collectible. Is that version of that thing is just, it's a one and done, and if you miss it, then you start paying the premium collector price. Now, for some things like Batman, there's always a new Batman coming out, so you'll never have a problem finding quote Batman. But if you want, the Adam West Batman, for example, from the 1960s television show, well, that's come and gone. If that's the one you want, too bad. Go to the collector market. So your Fonzie one, I'm sure, is out there. It's just a matter of how old is it and whether or not they've done a reissue anytime recently. So Good luck. Yeah. I'll keep my eyes open for you.
Yeah, please do.
All right. So documentary. Yes. Now, when you say to someone, I've watched documentary, or I'm going to tell you about a documentary, I think most people, the very first thing that comes to mind when you say documentary, they will generally think of something like National Geographic. They'll think of like a nature documentary about wildlife or the outdoors or something along those lines. I know for me, for the longest time, when someone said documentary, that's immediately where my mind went. Now, obviously, as we talk about almost every week on this show, documentaries can be about just about any topic. But I think the classical idea of what a documentary is about is most times people are going to gravitate towards that nature thing. And so the one I'm going to talk about, it's actually two. There are a series that I'm talking about today is in that classic vein, and it's called Alone in the Wilderness. It's apparently a classic. It's 20 years old. Have you ever heard of a documentary series called Alone in the Wilderness?
No, never heard of it.
Does the name Dick Pernecki mean anything to you?
No. Okay,
so this series, there's two of them. There was the original Alone in the Wilderness, and then there was Alone in the Wilderness Part 2. They both feature a gentleman named Dick Pernecki. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So in the I want to say it was the late 70s, early 60s. It was, in 1968. This gentleman was 53 years old, and he was from California, and he had lived a full life, and he decided that he was going to take his love for nature and his survivalist skills, and he moved to Alaska, a place called Twin Lakes in Alaska, and decided, I'm getting away from it all. He went up there. He had someone fly him up there in a small plane with a handful of supplies and a handful of tools, and from nothing, he just lived off the land. He built himself a little log cabin, and he hunted and gathered for his food. And it was this documentary, and he's a filmmaker and a photographer himself. So he documented everything. Which, considering this happened in 1968, the level of documentation and the quality of it was fantastic. And it's just a series of how this guy literally makes all these things. He made the log cabin, he made the tables, the chairs, the bowls, the spoons, the stools, like everything that he needed for this cabin, he literally made from the materials that he found in nature around him. He used this really thick moss for like his roof of his cabin to retain the heat. You saw him build like his own fireplace. It was like just the skills it took to do this. I was fascinated. I couldn't look away. It was riveting how how skilled this guy was with his tools to be able to build these kinds of things to the level of quality that you saw in the film. And apparently he lived out there for the next 30 years of his life, almost completely devoid of any contact with anybody else. He had occasionally, I think it was once every couple of months, a little prop plane would come in and bring him supplies and bring him mail. And he would, like, because he was writing and documenting everything, he had like cans of old film and journals, and he would give those to the person that came in, and that guy would get them all developed and stuff. And then in the, I think it was in the late 70s, after he'd been there about 10 years, they put out this documentary, and it was a big hit with PBS, and then which is where I saw it this week. And then about a decade later, they did a part 2, which was just the follow-up of, okay, here's what he's done, in the years since then. And apparently he has like this huge following of like nature and survivalist people. Like, they hold him up in the highest regard just because of the skills that he had, and the fact that he documented so much of it at a time when people weren't doing that and weren't documenting it. And he put out a bunch of books of his photographs, and I got to think that's sort of what helped pay for some of the costs that were involved around getting the supplies to him. But when he eventually died in I want to say it was died in 2003. He bequeathed his cabin and all of that stuff to the state of Alaska, and it's part of a national park now, and you can actually go and visit it. And after I watched they're 2 1-hour documentaries. After I watched them, like, I wanted to read up on this guy. It was fascinating. So if that sounds like that's the documentary that might be up your alley, I strongly encourage you to check it out. It's called Alone in the Wilderness, Part 1 and 2. I watched them on PBS. They were selling the video, so I got to think they're available out there somewhere. The gentleman's name, Dick Pernecki, and I was reading reviews of it, and like, people were saying, I watch this with my kids, and I watch this with my elderly parents. Like, it's just something about watching this guy create this lifestyle out of nothing is just so riveting and fascinating to watch. And I guess given that we've all been living in isolation because of the coronavirus for the last year, it's interesting to see how this guy did it in a circumstance where he wasn't required to do it, but he had this incredible skill set that just let him thrive. So yeah, it's fascinating.
You like watching documentaries.
I do. I love it.
I like binge watching shows with my wife. It's just something we do. And I just recently finished up The Sons of Anarchy. We finally got through it. I didn't like it. I thought it sucked. I was ready to bail back in like season 1, and my wife kept saying, just give it a chance. It's going to get good, And then I think it finally just got to the point where she says, well, we've come this far. We might as well just finish it. Derek, between me and you, I think she just stuck around because they kept showing Charlie Hunnam's butt. To be honest, that's what I think. But anyway, so we got done and we thought, well, we got to watch another show. So she had one she wanted us to watch called The Imposters, and I hated it. And then we tried watching Dark, the one that you recommended, and it was good, but I found it was just like a German version of Stranger Things. So I wasn't all that big on it. So I just ended up watching Three's Company on Deja Vu.
Oh my God, of course you did.
Because they're into the episodes where Terry joined. So that's all I've been doing is watching that. I'm lame. I just do the same things over and over again. And since I'm lame,
here's your dad joke of the week.
All right. Since we're doing the Cannonball Run this week, I thought we would do something involving race cars for a joke. Okay?
Okay.
Race car forward spells race car. Race car backward spells race car. What happens when you put it sideways?
I have no idea.
It kills Paul Walker.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, man, I'm going to hell.
Not cool, man.
Star Trek could always see into the future, couldn't they?
What do you have that we can slap Star Trek logos onto?
Shatner's hair.
The toys that made us.
The TJ Hooker hair.
TJ Hooker.
I can have auxiliary power back in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, I really like it.
Con!
Why don't I give you a quick scan to make sure you're okay?
Kirk got around a little bit.
Go.
Do you need a tranquilizer?
Oh, my God.
All right, Derek, it was over to me this week. I got to nominate a film, and I went with the 1981 sort of ensemble cast film, The Cannonball Run. First of all, before we get into it, you cannot find this movie anywhere. It's not on Netflix. It's not on Amazon Prime. even the on-demand movie services that our local cable provides, you can't find it. So HBO owns the non-theatrical rights to this movie. So I don't know, maybe if you've got HBO Max or whatever it's called, maybe you can get it there. But in Canada, we have something called Crave, and Crave has the rights to distribute most of HBO's properties, but it's not on there either. Warner Brothers owns the rights to the sequel, so you can get that one on Netflix, but not the original. But lucky for me, Derek, back in the day, I used to love this movie. And a mutual friend of ours gave me a copy of this movie years ago on DVD. And when I worked at Ontario Place, back when I was younger, a bunch of us used to always get together and we'd have movie nights. And this was one of the ones we'd watch regularly. But these days, with all the streaming that's available, I don't even have a DVD player that's hooked up in my house, believe it or not. So I had to bust out my DVD player and then set it up in the TV in the living room. Derek, did you have any issues finding this movie to watch?
Oh, I had such a hard time. So exactly like you said, I went online, couldn't find it. Checked all the streaming services, couldn't find it. Went to Amazon Canada. Oh yeah, the Blu-ray was available for like $30 or $40. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to like the movie that much. I don't feel like I want to own it. And then I managed to find a used copy of the DVD for like $6 or $7, but the shipping was going to be more than that. And they wanted like 6 to 8 weeks to send me the movie. So yeah, I was sort of at a loss. I almost had to reach out to you and say, Chris, as much as I am genuinely interested in watching this movie, I cannot find a copy of it. We're going to have to do something else. And then someone suggested, why don't you try your public library? I thought that's a great idea. So I went online and I typed in public library, and sure enough, they have tons of copies. I'm like, that's great. I called them up. Hey, are you open? Because with COVID protocols, things are locked down. They're like, just like a store, you just order online, you come pick it up, you're done. I'm like, that's great. But you need to have a library card. Oh, I have one of those. Oh, when was the last time you used it? Oh, it's been a while. Well, I learned that library cards in the great city of Toronto expire after 2 years. So my library card had long ago expired. And I said, well, how do I renew it? Oh, no problem. Once the libraries open up, come on in and we'll get you a new card. Doesn't really help my problem now. So I was sort of at a loss. I called a few of my friends. Hey, anyone got a library card? Anyone got a library card? Someone go and rent me this movie? And no, I couldn't. I had no luck. So finally, as just sort of a last stab in the dark, I have a buddy who has an extensive digital movie library. We won't talk about how he has acquired this, but he has a lot of digital movies. And on a whim, I just thought I'll reach out to this guy. He's sometimes a little tough to get a response from because he's got 2 really young kids right now. And as fortune had it, I messaged him. I was like, any chance you got Cannonball Run? 5 minutes later, I get a response. Yeah, I have Cannonball Run 1, 2, and 3. What do you need? I'm like, wow, they made 3 of those?
They made 3? They made
apparently they made 3.
I know 1 and 2. I never heard of them 3.
I don't know.
And then, he's got it.
Apparently he's got it. So I said, well, I told him what was going on. I'm like, look, I can drive over to your house. You just put on a little digital stick, and he's like, no. We figured out a way for him to transfer the movie to me. So nice. I did finally manage to get a copy of this. My fear was that some of our listeners, maybe who have never seen it or haven't seen it in a long time, are going to have a hard time following along with the podcast because they haven't been able to watch it either. So I hope if people are sticking around that they get enough out of this that even if they haven't seen the movie in a while, they still have fun listening to our banter.
Well, yeah, we get to be nostalgic around here and go back. So I put the movie on and my wife made it through about 15 minutes. And then she was like, this movie's stupid. I'm going to bed. And then she says, and by the way, you need to find a new hobby. This podcast is killing me. So Cannonball Run is directed by Hal Needham, former stuntman Hal Needham. It was released on June the 19th, 1981. It had a budget of $16 million. It made 10 times that much at the domestic box office in the U.S. Taking a look at the box office from 81, good year for movies back then. Raiders of the Lost Ark, number 1. It doubled the next film, which was On Golden Pond. Superman 2 was third, and Arthur, that's a good movie. Stripes. Oh, what? You thought it was terrible? Oh, we definitely have to do Arthur on an upcoming.
We did Arthur, didn't we?
No, we didn't.
I was sure we did Arthur already on one of our old podcasts. I'm calling your bluff on that one. We totally did.
Well, I'll have to go back through the archives and check, but I'm sure
it was so bad that even you don't remember it. So
no, that movie was good. Stripes, which was fantastic, and Cannonball Run, which was number 6. Followed up by Chariots of Fire, For Your Eyes Only, Four Seasons, and Clash of the Titans. God, a lot of good movies. But that was 1981. It's been 40 years since its release. A lot has changed in the world since then. And I'm pretty sure it's pretty safe to say that the changes in society are clearly reflected when you go back and watch this movie. Derek, we obviously have a lot of fun. We get to go back in time. We get to watch these Gen X movies. I look forward to this every week. So what are your thoughts? I think let's just start with your general thoughts. And then I think I'd like to kick things off with some of the problematic areas of the film, to say the least. So what are your general thoughts? You finally found the movie, after a lot of searching, and you watched it. Initial thoughts after 40 years.
All right. So I had seen the Cannonball Run before, probably in the mid 80s on home video. I think I remember seeing it probably one time. I don't remember, or I didn't remember a lot of them. I know the broad strokes. I know what it's about. I remembered certain little bits and pieces here and there. But again, when I watched it for the first time, I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. So a lot of the humor, a lot of the subtlety, a lot of the sexual innuendo would have gone right over my head. So it was almost like coming to the movie for the very first time and seeing it that way. And let me tell you, I loved it.
Ooh,
I loved it.
Wow.
I thought that despite a handful of issues, it held up very well in my mind for what it was. The idea of this wacky ensemble of characters that are racing across the U.S. for a cash prize. Just the concept of it is so simple and so crazy. And I think it worked so well, and it allowed so many performers to just highlight what they're good at in ways that it could still contribute to this ensemble film. I loved it. There was so much to like about this movie, and I honestly can't wait to watch it again in a few weeks. I enjoyed it that much. I'm really looking forward to a rewatch, and I'm gonna try to encourage some other people. I'll maybe sit down and get my wife to watch it again with me. But yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed it.
This is going to be an interesting podcast because usually, I'm the old guy. I like to go back and watch these movies. I don't think they've aged at all. And I'm like, get off my lawn if you don't like this stuff. But this one, I'll be honest, I really liked the Cannonball Run when I was younger. Like I say, we used to have these movie nights. I'd watch it over and over again. But watching it this time around, I don't know. For whatever reason, I enjoyed it. And there's multiple times where I laughed, out loud. But there's quite a few problematic areas in this movie. I'll be the first to admit. Some of the misogyny and the sexism. Farrah Fawcett, they basically kidnap and drug her.
Yeah.
And the scene when Burt Reynolds first sees her in the bar, that scene does not star Farrah Fawcett. It stars Farrah Fawcett's nipples.
Yes.
Oh, my.
Oh, and speaking of which, Adrienne Barbeau, her acting in this movie basically consists of her unzipping her outfit. And let me tell you, that wasn't the only time that cleavage is prominently featured in this movie. If you even go to the IMDb page for this movie, and if you look, how they have an images section?
Yes.
Go there. 5 of the first 6 pictures feature boobs.
No, you're absolutely right. I have it open here right now.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
There's Adrienne Barbeau, the girl that's sitting beside her in the Lamborghini, the waitress at the diner that Jamie Farr pulls up to, Farrah Fawcett's, braless nipples, Seymour's bevy of girlfriends, and even the female cop that pulls over Adrienne Barbeau. She leans into the car and you can see her cleavage. They should have just called this movie The Cannon Boobs Run, for crying out loud. So I was just almost taken aback by that. And I'm usually not. But this week when I watched this, I was like, holy smokes, I just couldn't believe it. So that was one area that I thought was a bit problematic. The other one was the way the film deals with race. So you got Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin, 2 of the best people in this movie, by the way, which we'll get to. And they're dressed up as priests in a Ferrari. And they pull up alongside the ambulance. Remember when they want Burt Reynolds to pull over so they can bless the ambulance?
So we can bless you. Yeah.
So funny. And Dom DeLuise wants to pull over. And Burt Reynolds is like, those 2 are priests? One of them is black.
Yeah.
He's like, it's like as if you can't be black and be a priest. And Dom DeLuise is like, oh yeah, no, they've got black priests now.
They've got those now, I think is what he said or something. Yeah.
And Burt Reynolds like, you want me to pull over for a black priest in a red Ferrari? And then later in the movie, Burt Reynolds calls him the chocolate monk for crying out loud. Like, jeez. Like, I mean, so there's definitely some problematic. Did you not find that? You're usually the one that's a bit more of a, sensitive to these kind of things. Did you find anything kind of problematic with the film overall?
Oh, I mean, yeah, believe this movie has issues, especially as we often say, when you hold it up to today's lens, there's a lot of problems in it from that perspective. And I think the defense, we'll call it small d defense, not that it's really a defense, but it's a product of its time. And it's not to say that these things were right in the time they were done, but they were not called out as being problematic. So things like the objectification of the women. There's a lot of racial stuff that goes on in here. As you've already mentioned a couple of examples, and there's certainly a few more, which I'm sure we'll get into. But again, for me, I'm sort of watching this through the lens of the broader story and the ensemble comedy. And the thing with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis, like if you go back to a lot of their performances, like their stand-up performances and their live shows, there's a ton of racism in that. And the guys are always making fun of Sammy Davis for being Jewish and for being black. And that's not to say that it was right, but part of the sketch was that his character, Sammy Davis on stage, always seemed to be accepting of it as, well, that's the point. It's like when you got a thin guy and a fat guy and the jokes are all about the fat guy at his expense. And he's sort of like, yeah, that's my joke, is I'm the fat guy, make fun of me. It's almost like for Sammy Davis, a lot of the banter between him and the rest of the Rat Pack, when they were making fun of him, that's a lot of what they made fun of. He's short, he's black, he's Jewish. So it's like, again, not to say that it was right, but it was like he accepted it, or at least on stage, he pretended to accept it. And so knowing that was sort of part of the shtick of these two guys, that was sort of the lens I watched it through. Was here are two guys that I know have a long history together, and this is just part of the banter that they tend to have. Again, not to excuse it, but yeah.
So the movie opens up. Let's get into this movie. And
yes, let's.
It's going to be goofy right off the top because it opens with the animated car chase around the 20th Century Fox logo, which I thought was funny. And then the movie opens up with the two girls in the spandex bodysuits driving the Lamborghini, and they pull up to the speed limit sign and they use spray paint to cross out the 55-mile-per-hour limit. And this is actually important because this is the concept of the real life race that this movie is based on. So there was this race. It was actually called the Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash. And it was created by this race car driver and this writer, Brock Yates. And he did it to protest the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit, which was the norm, at the time. Probably still is, I guess. But he wanted to protest the speed limit because, of course, Derek, there's nothing more American than thinking rules are some sort of infringement on your rights. So he came up with this idea for people to race across the country, starting in either New York or in Connecticut and going all the way to Redondo Beach, California. Now, let's talk a little bit about the director. I mentioned him, Hal Needham. He was a former stuntman. Actually, he was one of the most successful stuntmen in Hollywood history. Any guess how many television episodes that he actually worked on? Take a guess.
Television? Yeah. Like how? I don't know. 30.
A little bit higher.
40.
More.
50.
4,500 television episodes and 310 films in his career. This is a prolific stuntman. He actually doubled for Burt Reynolds in Gator in 1976, and they became friends. And then he got a chance to direct, and he made one hell of a splash when he made Smokey and the Bandit, which we covered, on this show. And he directed 10 movies in total, 6 of them with Burt Reynolds. They made quite the team, there for a while. From 78 to 1982, Burt Reynolds was the highest grossing actor in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, a lot of that was due to his work with Hal Needham, right? And I think it's easy to forget how popular these guys were, back in the day. You could argue that Needham's movies with Burt Reynolds got progressively worse as the years went on. Smokey and the Bandit was great. Like I say, we reviewed that, on this back on like 144 of this episode or this podcast. But then he went on to direct Reynolds in Hooper in 78, Smokey and the Bandit 2 in 80, The Cannonball Run, this one in 81, Stroker Ace, a personal favorite, Derek, back in 83.
Never seen it.
I liked it. Oh God, we got to do that one. And then The Cannonball Run 2 in 84. Now, I actually saw 4 of those movies in the theater when they were originally released. Have I mentioned that I'm old, Derek?
A few times, yeah.
In fact, I'm the OG. I wrote a song about that in case you missed it last week.
Oh,
I'm not going to
play it again right now.
No, I'm not. So what did you think about the cast? Let's talk about the cast, shall we?
Okay, so huge cast.
Yeah.
I didn't really remember this movie very well. I just knew it had this huge cast. I knew Burt Reynolds was in it. I knew Farrah Fawcett. Like, basically, I remembered a lot of the Burt Reynolds stuff, like with the ambulance. So I knew it was Burt Reynolds, Farrah Fawcett, Dom DeLuise.
Of course.
I remembered Adrienne Barbeau, or at least part of her. And that was pretty much it. I knew there was a lot of other people, but I didn't know who. I had no idea that Roger Moore was in this until I started watching it. Yeah. And then you see Dean Martin and Sammy Davis. You're like, okay. And then Terry Bradshaw shows up. I'm like, hey, it's Terry Bradshaw. Jackie Chan, Burt Convy, I recognized right away because I watched the Password Game Show all the time. Jamie Farr playing an Arabian Sheik, which was super racist.
You think?
And I love, like, they have Jackie Chan playing a Japanese guy, but he's Chinese. Again, a little racist there. Peter Fonda shows up later in the movie for a small part. It's just like, wow, this movie has a lot of people, and I'm sure there's a few others that I just didn't recognize that were probably big in the 60s and 70s. It almost seemed like it was this opportunity for, and I'm sure this happens in Hollywood a lot, where they knew they were going to make an ensemble. They had a handful of people that were, in charge of the money and the casting, and they went, I always want to work with this guy. Let's bring him on the movie. Or, hey, you know who's good and fun to work with? These guys. Why don't we invite them on? And then, hey, you know who these guys enjoy working with? These other guys. And I just got the sense that was how this movie came together, was a lot of that in-house camaraderie of who's your friend, who have you worked with before, who's fun to have on set. Again, I have no idea if that's actually how this movie came together, but I got the impression that's how this movie came together. And for me, I felt that as I'm watching it, and a lot of these people are not in scenes with any of these other cast members. And that's, I think that might be part of what I liked about it was, you have this huge ensemble and you don't really spend a lot of time with really any of them, except for Burt Reynolds. Like, obviously he's the star of this movie and he probably has the most screen time, like the Dom DeLuise, Burt Reynolds portion of it. But all these other people are like, they have their bits and pieces and you're constantly jumping back and forth between the characters. And I think that's part of what kept my attention, was every time they would go to a different character, I would want to think, who are they going to go to next? And what are these other characters doing while these characters are getting up to whatever craziness they're happy to get up to? So no, I really liked it. I thought the casting was great.
So let's talk about Burt Reynolds for a second. I think he gets pigeonholed into these Hal Needham movies, and he's mostly remembered for them, and I guess rightly so. But the thing I think that gets lost in a lot of this is just how good of an actor that he actually was. And if you don't believe me, go back and watch, The Longest Yard or Sharky's Machine or Deliverance. And even if you look a little bit later in his career, there was this little movie that came out in 89. It was called Breakin' In with Casey Zamasco. And Reynolds played this like aging bank robber, and he was teaching the tools of the trade to this young guy. And it was so good. And then, of course, Boogie Nights,
Of course, yeah.
Received his only Oscar nomination for that. And, we always talk about this. The Academy usually likes to give awards to people like him, as a reward for their body of work. But it just wasn't meant to be for Reynolds that year, because unfortunately, another veteran actor was rewarded for his body of work, and that was Robin Williams when he was in Good Will Hunting. And because he had been nominated previously for Good Morning Vietnam, he lost out to Michael Douglas in Wall Street, rightly so, I guess. But even though Reynolds never got his Oscar, he was a really, really good actor. And I don't think he ever really got his due. But some of it was his own fault, because in a lot of these Hal Needham movies, he basically just played a caricature of himself.
Yeah, he played himself.
Yeah.
Or at least he played what people believed he was. And I think that's an important distinction. And I got to think, again, I don't know, but I got to think that these characters were pretty close to him in real life, or at least I think that's what most people thought. So whether or not that was true, I think he understood the value of it. This is what people expect of me. I can make a lot of money being this person, assuming he wasn't already that person, in which case it would have made that job even easier.
That wasn't, I think you could argue that wasn't the biggest mistake that he made in his career, just playing himself. His biggest mistake he made was in 1983. He was actually offered Jack Nicholson's role in Terms of Endearment.
Well, I heard that, yeah.
And he turned it down. He felt it was too small of a role for him. And instead, he decided to do Stroker Ace. And Stroker Ace bombed. And Jack Nicholson won the Oscar for his part. And really, Burt Reynolds' career took a nosedive, and it never really recovered after that. You mentioned Dom DeLuise. I want to touch base on him for a second. You could argue that he probably wouldn't even have an acting career if it wasn't for Burt Reynolds.
That's fair.
I mean, he did have a lot of cameos in Mel Brooks movies. Remember, he was in History of the World Part 1.
Yep.
And Blazing Saddles, silent movie, Spaceballs, But he played the lead role in a movie, the hell was the name, but I think it was called Fatso. But
there's a politically correct title for you.
Yeah, exactly. It was the 80s, right? But he was in this movie called The End with Burt Reynolds. And they just became friends. And then Reynolds put him in the Cannonball Run and Smokey and the Bandit 2. And then he really got into a lot of voice work with Don Bluth, animated films in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked up his IMDb. Like that's what he's been doing the last 20 years. A lot of voice work.
I think you could argue that he's probably best known for the blooper reels at the end of Cannonball Run.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have a question. Dom DeLuise, are you a fan, yay or nay?
Of him in general?
Yeah.
I mean, I was certainly a fan of what he did in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think I personally, I find for me, a lot of great comedic setups, a lot of great, humorous situations and funny scenes on TV and in movies generally work better with a pair. And we found that with podcasting, right? No one wants to listen to one guy drone on for an hour. Sorry, that's usually me. But when you can bounce ideas back and forth, especially with when you have a comedic duo that have that timing and that relationship and they can banter off each other and they, that's usually where you strike gold. And I find that the combo of Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise together, like you can just tell these are two guys that enjoy each other's company, that get each other's sense of humor, and they just play off each other so well. And you laugh at the fact that they're laughing at each other with you. And that's sort of why I like Dom DeLuise. I don't think I would care for him so much on his own, but seeing him in an opportunity to see him together with Burt Reynolds, that to me is a good time.
Yeah, that's a good point because he really was a good compliment for Burt Reynolds. Because if you think about it, Burt Reynolds, this macho, good-looking guy, and Dom's, overweight. He's slightly effeminate. Burt could kind of come off as a bit of a jerk, but Dom was like this kind spirit. They worked really well together. You're right. I know. I mentioned the movie The End. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's from 1978, and it deals with suicide and touchy subject at the time. A touchy subject anytime, but especially I guess in 78. But it was actually really, really good. And then after Smokey and the Bandit became this, huge success, the studio wanted Reynolds to do Hooper, this movie. And he agreed. And he said, I'll do it, but I'll do it on one condition. That, they allowed him to star in a script about suicide, this movie, The End. And it was released in 78. It was a small movie. They made it for like $3 million, but it made like $45 million at the box office. And it formed like a lifelong friendship between Reynolds and DeLuise. So, Sammy Davis Jr., you mentioned, he is hands down my favorite actor in this movie. I love Sammy Davis Jr. There's just something about him. I absolutely love him. He has the best lines in this movie. I think he's in the best scenes in this movie, which we'll come back to. We'll talk about some of the other cast, but I want to come back to some of our favorite scenes because he's definitely in them. And the guy was in the original Rat Pack for crying out loud. Like, and he's in this. It's so good. Adrienne Barbeau. She was in Maude. You mentioned a couple weeks ago, we were talking about her. You mentioned she was in Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Which I had forgot about until you mentioned it. She was in Creepshow. And she was in an episode of Sons of Anarchy, which I mentioned when we were talking about her the other week. She's a real product of the 70s, though. You know? And unfortunately, she's a product of that sexism that was going on at the time. And the reason I say that is because she's basically known for one thing. She had big breasts.
Two things.
Yeah,
two things.
That's it. Like, you know, she gets exploited for that in almost all of her movies, and she gets exploited for it here. You mentioned Roger Moore, too.
Hang on. I want to go back to Adrienne Barbeau for a minute.
Sure.
So you talked off the top about the idea of the way that women are treated and depicted in this movie, being not positive, and you're right. But I also felt that the Adrienne Barbeau and the other woman who, obviously is not someone as famous, so we don't know who she is without looking her up. So you have the concept is that you've got these two beautiful women who have these very tight outfits and very large breasts, and they're going to drive the fastest, sleekest car to try and win this race, knowing that when they get pulled over, the expectation is that the cops are going to be men, and that if they unzip their shirts a little bit and they show a little skin, the cops are more likely to let them off, either with a warning or definitely not confiscate car and any of that stuff. And so what? They can continue on with their race. They can basically use their sex appeal as a tool in their arsenal to get them out of trouble, to try and win this race and win this money. And I think that despite what you may feel about the objectification of women in the movie in general, I think these characters almost bring a certain amount of empowerment to it, where the way the characters are depicted anyway is that these women are knowingly doing this to gain an advantage over the men that they're going to be pitted against. Their adversaries are these male police officers, and they figured out that men are stupid, and if you show some boobs, men are less likely to give you a hard time about it. And that's exactly what you see in this movie. They get pulled over a couple of times. They unzip their tops to produce IDs that they keep in their bras and their driver's licenses and such, and they get away with it. So yes, from the audience watching this movie, there's a lot of boobs here. There's a lot of cleavage in this, as there are in many movies in the 80s. It's just, par for the course for the 80s, which again doesn't excuse it. But I felt that these characters, at least, the way that characters are depicted is they have chosen to do this and exploit themselves in a way that they are empowered to gain from their sex appeal. So despite some of the other issues with the movie, I actually didn't have, from a more perspective today's lens, I didn't have a problem with them doing this, because I felt they were doing this because they chose to do it. So for right or for wrong, that was my takeaway from them.
The other girl that you mentioned, you didn't know who she was, Tara Buckman was her name.
Sure.
You're right. She didn't do a whole lot other than that. And speaking of not doing a whole lot other than this, Roger Moore, he was the best Bond. But the thing was, he was in my mind anyway. I like in this movie, he plays a guy that thinks he's Roger Moore. He's not actually Roger Moore.
I thought that was a clever way.
That was pretty cool. Yeah. But other than James Bond, he didn't do a whole lot. I guess he was in The Saint back in the 60s on TV.
Wasn't he in I Spy, the TV show?
No, that was Robert Culp. That was Robert Culp and Bill Cosby.
The Saint. You're right. Yeah, sorry, you said it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, but I think everyone remembers him as Bond. That's pretty much all that. But in this movie, he plays into all those sexist sort of themes again. Like every time you see him, he's got a different girl in his arm, and I did like kind of how they poke fun of his Bond character. At the end when he gets launched into the ocean from the ejection seat. I thought it was pretty cool. One other guy I wanted to mention. So later in the movie, remember when they all get into that big rumble with the biker gang?
The bikers? Yeah.
And by the way, I learned when I was watching Sons of Anarchy that the proper term isn't biker gang. I used to always use that term. It's MC. It's short for motorcycle club.
Sure.
But anyway, so that scene with the big rumble, there's this bald biker, and like he cuts Burt Convey's tie, and then in the fight scene, he asked Burt Reynolds to punch him. He's like, punch me on the other side of my face.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
So I was watching this movie, and I swore that was Pat Roach. So Pat Roach is a Hollywood stuntman. Derek, you probably know him best from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
Remember
I was
the
going to
bald
say,
mechanic?
I don't know his name, but that was definitely the guy. He appeared in Raiders, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade, and each time he gets a crap beat out of him.
And I'm like, I know that's Pat Roach. So I looked it up, but it's not Pat Roach, believe it or not.
Oh, it's not. I was sure it was. I didn't look it up. I was just sure. I'm like, oh, that's
positive. It's a bit actor named Robert Tessier. And he was a stuntman as well. But anyway, that just came to my mind. So I should also mention Seymour's mom looked really familiar to me. And I was like, I can't put my finger on who she is. Her name was Molly Pecan. She was in Fiddler on the Roof. And I was like, no, that's not where I saw her. And I kept thinking about it. She was in The Facts of Life that I recognized her from.
Sure.
She played Natalie's grandma, Mona. But anyway, so back to the movie. So the thing is, if you remember back to the beginning of the film, they're all trying to figure out ways to like get an edge, in this race. So they're coming up with vehicles they're going to drive in, and a lot of the ways that people got across the country in this film were based on real life examples from the Cannonball race that Brock Yates had created. And Brock Yates actually served as a writer on this movie itself. Probably important, like he created the race, so I guess he should write the movie, right? I like the scene when Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise are talking about different vehicles. And Dom DeLuise like, maybe we could get a black Trans Am.
Yeah.
And Burt Reynolds, it's been done. Yeah. That was pretty funny. So the scene in the back of the ambulance, remember when Dom DeLuise has that cast on his finger? And he's like, it only hurts when I point. That was funny. The guy that's talking to them, the ambulance attendant, that's the director. That's Hal Needham.
I read that. Yeah, it's a little bit cameo. Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting because he has a line and he says, this thing goes through traffic like shot through a gun. And you can tell it's dubbed because his lips say, this thing goes through traffic like shit through a goose. And then I'm watching this, I'm thinking, did I get like an edited for TV version on this DVD? But then in almost like the next scene, Mel Tillis and Terry Bradshaw drive their car into a swimming pool and Mel Tillis says shit. So I thought that was weird why that one line was like dubbed over. But speaking of Mel Tillis too, by the way, another guy from the cast, I always found it very interesting. I don't know much about this, but he had a really, really bad stutter, obviously.
Yeah, I figured that had to be real because I thought in a couple of scenes, I'm like, this seems a little more excessive than it needs to be. I thought it must be a real thing. Yep. And he obviously must have a relationship with the people who are making this movie because I didn't feel that was a necessary character quirk for the character he was playing. So I'm like, the only reason they would have left this in here, because I mean, you certainly wouldn't put it in intentionally if he didn't stutter. So I thought that just must be the way this guy is, and they must just know him. Like I had no idea who he was. But
so the thing with him was he had a stutter in real life, and that was the way he talked. But he was a country singer, and when he would sing, he didn't have a stutter. It was the weirdest thing. I don't know.
That's true. I think we talked about that on a previous podcast way back. That's a thing. Your brain accesses music from a different part than speech, and that's a big part of speech therapy. When people who are stutterers, that's one of the things they tell them is you try to sing what you want to say. And I've read a couple of books, fiction and nonfiction, where characters do that. It's a very popular way to try and overcome a stutter.
Interesting. Mr. Foyt, that guy. The actor's name was George Firth. He did quite a bit of like bit parts around this time. I remember he was in Blazing Saddles. He was in Young Doctors in Love, and he was in Dr. Detroit. Remember we've talked about that?
I've never seen it, but I am familiar with the movie.
I thought you remember a couple episodes ago you were singing the song with me.
Oh, I know the song. I know the movie. I've never seen it.
Oh, you never? Oh my God! Well, he was in that movie. He was Skridlow's dad. I remember he was like the dean of the college, but one of the opening scenes, he's in it. He's in that meeting with Farrah Fawcett, and he looks around the room and he sees there's quite a few people there, and he's like, "Well, this is it's a pretty good turnout." I'm like, "Jeez, my God." So one thing I wanted to mention about this movie too, I've mentioned before, the typical Hollywood formula. Most Hollywood scripts are like boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. In other words, the movie opens up, characters are introduced, everything goes to crap in the second act, and then everything works out in the end. Typical Hollywood movie, But just like in Smokey and the Bandit in this movie, does not adhere to that formula in anyway. Like, it's just a chase, like a race across the country. Although you can tell that they kind of got near the end of the movie and they were like, well, we got to have some kind of a climax. So that's when they had the big fight with the biker gang.
Yeah.
Or the MC.
Absolutely.
The MC. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Any favorite scene? So you said you really enjoyed it. What would you say your favorite scene?
One of the things that I remembered from my very young initial viewing was that they had this crazy doctor, like that he had the cross eyes and he was like this older, creepy, like very large doctor. Yeah. And again, I sort of remember that
music.
Yes. It was like he came on and you thought he was like ready to have a horror movie. And so I remembered the physical comedy that came with that character, but I didn't realize how much dialogue and humor came out of that part of it when they first meet him and Burt Reynolds keeps saying, never tell me where you found him. I don't want to know. Like that just became a running gag.
Yeah.
But when they met the doctor and he's holding out his finger and he's like, I'm a proctologist. And he's like wiping his finger all over Burt Reynolds' face. And then a couple of points through the movie, he's like holding out his, like when Farrah Fawcett comes in and he's like, do you want me to do an exam? He's like holding out his finger. It's like just the humor that came from just a few lines and a couple of like crazy looks from this guy who is already funny to look at in this situation. I found a lot more humor in those scenes than I expected to because I didn't remember any of the jokes because I didn't get any of the jokes when I was younger watching it for the first time. So just the scenes with Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise and the doctor killed me. Like I laughed so much.
Now that I'm thinking about the movie more and more, I'm laughing more and more. That doctor, I think my favorite part with him was when they get pulled over by the cops and the police officer's like, we got to talk to the doctor. And then they open up the van, or they open up the side of the ambulance, and they see Farrah Fawcett, and she's drugged. She's laying there, and then the doctor comes in and he says she's in tremendous pain. It's causing her to make certain delirious trememiums. I don't know if he was supposed to flub that line. The way it just tails off, or I don't know if he forgot his line or if they just left it in. I don't know, but that made me laugh. Like I really laughed at that. And then
or the scene where he's got to give her the needle and they're like, oh yeah, it's perfectly fine. And he's like, you give it to yourself all the time. And he's like, yeah. And they're like, go ahead. And you can see he's like, no. And then he gives himself the needle. Just that whole scene, just, oh my God, I laughed so much.
And then when they get away from the cops, and then they're like, oh, she did really good. She helped get us out of this. And the doctor says, yeah, she should have her picture on the cover of the American Medical Journal. And then he just passes out.
Yeah.
So funny. So I would say, hands down, my favorite scene in the whole movie is at the beginning when all the racers are getting ready for the big race. It's like the night before the race, and they're all in the bar. And Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., they're dressed as the priests.
Oh, yeah.
It's so funny. I don't even think I can get through this.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
And they're talking. But they're not talking like priests. And there's a guy at the bar, and he just keeps reacting to the things that they say. Yeah. I was laughing so hard. My wife, that's what made her get up and leave. She's like, this movie is dumb. She goes, I was making the couch shake. I was laughing so much. So they're swearing, they're drinking, and this guy at the bar just keeps reacting to it all. And it just makes me laugh more and more. Dean Martin at one point sees the two girls in the spandex outfits, and he says to Sammy Davis Jr., he's like, man, if we were Methodists, we'd have a real shot at getting laid. And the guy at the bar just like...
He does a spit take?
Yeah, he snaps his head around.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, my God.
And then
that was good.
Sammy Davis Jr. then gets on the phone and calls Jimmy the Greek and starts talking about putting money down on a bet. And then that's when the guy does the spit take. So that's, I think, one of the things that made me laugh the most. It's not the drinking or the profanity or the sex that offends this guy the most. No, it's the gambling. Yeah. the fact that, these priests, they can swear, they can drink, they can ogle women, that's all okay, but heaven forbid a priest should gamble. I don't know, that scene, that really made me laugh.
Well, and I liked later on, there's the scene where Burt Reynolds is trying to get back at Dean Martin and Sammy Davis, and he goes to the police officer and he says, there are these two guys dressed as priests and they're flashers. And it's like, I don't know, just the concept of ratting them out as not being priests, but saying that they're flashers. And it's just, I just thought that was funny. And then of course they later on when there's the confrontation, and that's where they have that really inappropriate dialogue where, just before the fight where they're all backed up and they start talking about it. And he's like, you told them we were flashers, and they like call them out on it. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's just these like little throwaway pieces that in the context of the movie are really funny.
That was a funny scene because when Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin pull them over to bless the car, Sammy Davis is letting the air out of their tires.
Yeah.
Right. And then they get done and he's like, why don't you take that piece of back to the junkyard? And they realize that they're not priests.
Yeah.
And Burt Reynolds says, they're not fathers, they're mothers. And then he slaps Dom DeLuise. And then that's when they go to the cop, like you mentioned. And I love it because Burt Reynolds says to the guy, do you take your law and order seriously in this town? And he's like a hit cop, like in this southern town. And there's this big banner across the road. It says, Sean Killicommy O'Hanlon. and then like you said, Burt Reynolds tells him that they're flashers. So the cop pulls him over. The first thing he says to Sammy Davis Jr., he's like, hey, Shorty, where'd you get all that jewelry? Like to imply that he stole it. I don't know. Jesus, I tell you. You mentioned also Jamie Farr as the Sheik. When he goes to that restaurant, it just dates the whole movie so much in a couple of ways. First of all, I don't know if you noticed, but when he pulls up, the girl says, she goes, that's the first time I've ever taken an order by a mobile phone.
Yeah.
And then, of course, because, she's a female, she has to show her cleavage. And then Jamie Farr recalls his order to her and he's like, okay, we have 6 lamb burgers, 6 shish kebabs. And then he looks at her cleavage and he goes, and 2 milk. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, again, this whole movie, I tell you. And then he says to her, do you ever consider joining a harem? And then he just gives her a big wad of bills. And he's like, here, get a physical. Like, the whole thing is just so sexist, I tell you. And then when the girls, like you mentioned, Adrienne Barbeau and Tara Buckman, every time they get pulled over, they use their sexuality to get out of tickets. And then the one time near the end, they get pulled over and it's a female cop.
Yeah.
But that's not good enough. This movie's got to push it because it's played by Valerie Perrine from Superman. I don't know if you recognized her.
No, I didn't.
Miss Tessmacher. Yeah. And so the girls know they're not going to get away with the ticket. But the female cop leans in and you can see her cleavage. And it's just like, oh my God, this movie just doesn't end. And then Jackie Chan in the one scene where he's in the computerized car and he's watching the porn movie.
Oh, yeah.
Behind the green door, which is like this, 70s thing. And then, of course, you can't have Jackie Chan in the movie and not show off his martial arts skills.
Yeah.
He took on the whole MC, not the biker gang.
Now, I had read, true or not, I read this in the trivia after the fact that so with Cannonball Run movie, they have the blooper reel during the credits. And apparently Jackie Chan thought that was a great idea. And that's why in so many of his movies after this, where he's the star, he does outtakes through the credits of his martial arts movies where you see him trying the stunts and flubbing them and not getting them correct, which I always liked. Like I've seen a lot of Jackie Chan movies over the years. And that to me is almost always one of the best parts is, you're getting a blooper reel at the end. And I had no idea I didn't know he was in this. And I didn't realize that was the inspiration was his involvement with the Cannonball Run. So I thought that was a nice little connector there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you got to rate this movie out of 10, you seem to enjoy it. What do you give it?
Well, hang on. Before we get there, I got a couple of quick things I want to run through.
Sure.
First of all, the music. One of the things I noticed was as each character had their because you've got such a large ensemble, most of the characters have their own music. And so that was another little wink, wink sort of cue to the audience of who you were going to be following. And I like that with the Roger Moore character, the music they had was like a slight ripoff of the James Bond theme music. Yep. So I like that a lot. I thought that was a good little wink, wink nod to him. The other thing I want to mention is sort of the elephant in the room with this movie is about the flub at the end of the movie. So the movie's a race. And ultimately, they depict that the two women in the tight outfits, Adrienne Barbeau and Friend, are the winners because they're the ones that get there first and punch the card first, and they win the Cannonball Run. But that's not correct.
No,
because
it's not.
the movie doesn't start with everybody starting at exactly the same time on a starting line. The race begins for each contestant as they hit the punch clock. And between each car, there's a couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's not so much first one to punch in. It's the one who has the shortest overall time.
That's right.
And so when they all arrive together, the person who left the original starting line last would be the one that's completing their time in the shortest amount of time. And again, it's a small. Well, it's
I noticed that too.
It's a detail that they just sort of hand wave and say, we're not worried about that. If it's a movie about a race, there needs to be a winner and there needs to be a climatic. Everybody comes to it at the same time. And the whole gimmick with Dom DeLuise as Captain Chaos, like the joke wouldn't work if you knew that, well, the Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise left 20 minutes later than Adrienne Barbeau. So the fact that she beats him to the punch clock on a foot race doesn't matter. They could walk there as slow as they want, and they're still going to have an overall better time than her. So that little detail sort of bugged me a bit. Yeah. But given the movie is what it is, and the time frame it is what it is, and that it's a Hal Needham movie, and you're just supposed to have fun with it, I'm willing to overlook that.
They obviously needed. I recognize they needed a visual hook. At the end of the movie to make it more dramatic. And I recognize that as well. That was a good point. I mean,
I'm willing to forgive that. But I felt that we couldn't talk about the movie and not at least acknowledge that. Right. So back to your original question, though. So my overall score on this, I think I got to give it between a 7.5 and an 8.
Wow.
Probably on its face, I like it as an 8 because I think it does have a lot of rewatchability. But it does have some issues, the fact that it's a product of its time, some of which you just can't forgive, but some of it you can sort of contextualize it a bit. So for that, I would maybe lean more towards a 7.5. So I'm sort of right between that 7.5 and an 8. Knowing some of the other movies we've done recently that I've given an 8, I think I got to give this one sort of in that same vein. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Wow, that's so high. And it's so surprising because usually I love all these old ones and you don't. I was surprised actually how old and dated it felt. I'd probably give it like a 3, but if it wasn't for Sammy Davis Jr. and some of his scenes, I'd probably bump it up to about a 5. So, but I mean, I enjoyed it when I was younger, but I mean, it was kind of problematic, and overall, it was just like okay. So, probably say about a 5 for me. So,
wow. Okay. That's
a little bit different this week.
I think it's the first time where you've recommended a movie, not really cared for it, and I've liked it more than you have.
Well,
it sounds like I liked it a lot more than you did. So.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I laughed at some of the scenes so much. But overall, the movie I thought was, it was just okay, which is interesting. I mean, when I nominate these movies, I watch the same things over and over. I get that. But a lot of these movies I nominate, I haven't seen in, 30 years, so... Sometimes it's a great nostalgic trip back, and sometimes it's, I go back and go, oh, man, it wasn't as good as I thought. But anyway, on that note, let's have some
fun with Caveman.
All right, I nominated this movie, so it's over to you, my friend. What do you got for me?
All right, so my first instinct was, I'll give you a whole bunch of trivia about Burt Reynolds. Right. But we did Smokey and the Bandit not too long ago, and I already did that.
Oh, yeah, we did, didn't we?
I thought, okay, well, we got Roger Moore. I'll do a bunch of James Bond trivia. Well, we've done James Bond movies. We've done Sean Connery movies. So I'm like, I've already gone down that road too. So it started limiting my options about where to go with this trivia. Ultimately, I decided I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about movie cars.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Now, I don't know if you're a, quote, car guy. I know a friend of ours is a huge car guy, and if he listens to this podcast, he's going to clean up on this trivia. But I'm going to give you a whole bunch of questions about movie cars.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do, I found this fantastic article when I was doing a little bit of research to set up this trivia, where they called out a whole bunch of movies that either were about the car or had pivotal important scenes in the movies that heavily featured a car, and it was like a car magazine that had written this article. So they talked about the specific make and model of each of these cars, and then they talked about the movie. So I'm going to give you the make and model of a car.
Okay.
And then I'm going to read the description of the movie. We'll do this in 2 phases. I'll give you the make and model of the car. Guess the movie. Right. In many cases, I don't think you're going to be able to. But if you can't, I will then tell you what the movie is about, and you give me the name of the film.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So,
I'm not a big car guy, but I'll do my
no,
best.
and I'm not either. And I think I would, if I just gave you the cars, you would not do well at all. And I don't think many of us would. But I'll give you the name of the movie, like the description of the movie, and I think that'll help. Okay. So in no particular order. First question. The car is a 1958 Plymouth Fury.
Christine.
Yes.
Woo! Yes.
Book. Okay. Good one. Some of these are going to be really easy and really obvious. This one is a gimme. A 1981 DeLorean DMC-12.
It's Back to the Future.
It is Back to the Future. Look at this. See, I don't even have to read what the movies are about. Okay. A 1961 Ferrari 250 GT.
I'm going to say Risky Business.
No. But that you got two chances on these. So this is the description of this movie. A high school wise guy is determined to have a day off from school despite what the principal thinks of that.
That was Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yes, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Yeah, you killed the car. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. A 1963 Volkswagen Beetle.
I'll say Herbie the Love Bug.
Yes, the Love Bug from 1968. I would have accepted any of the Herbie the Love Bug movies because I know they did a whole bunch of them. All right. There's another easy one for you. Aston Martin DB5.
I will go with James Bond.
Can you be more specific, please?
For Your Eyes Only?
Nope.
Oh.
I'll read you the description, which should give it away right away.
Yeah.
While investigating a gold magnate smuggling, a spy uncovers a plot to contaminate the Fort Knox Gold Reserve.
Goldfinger.
Yes, Goldfinger. All right. Okay, next car on the list. 1968 Ford Mustang GT Fastback.
Ooh, I don't know.
All right, the movie is about an all guts, no glory San Francisco cop becomes determined to find the underworld kingpin that killed the witness in his protection.
Oh, is it French Connection?
It is not French Connection.
No.
Any other guesses? San Francisco Cop. Movie about a car.
Don't know.
Famous car chase. No. Bullet with Steve McQueen.
What year was the car?
1968 Ford Mustang GT Fastback.
I thought you said a 1961 Mustang. I don't know. Okay, never mind. Not that matters. Okay.
All right. A Porsche 928.
Was that Risky Business?
That was Risky Business.
Oh, okay. Yes. Nice.
All right. These next two, super right over the plate, easy ones for you. These are the last two. 1974 Dodge Monaco.
Oh, that's the Blues Brothers.
That is the Blues Brothers.
Woo!
Yes. Cop car, cop engine. Yep.
Cop shocks.
Yep.
Before catalytic converters, so it runs good on regular gas.
Yep. All right. Last one. Super easy one for you here. 1977 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am.
Oh, it's Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandit. You got it, buddy. I figured I had to end with Smokey. That was sort of our
kind of come full circle.
Yeah, exactly.
That's perfect.
Yep. So again, I'm not a car guy, but and I know you're not really a car guy, but you did pretty well. But again, like if I say DeLorean, 99% of the people are going to know that's Back to the Future. So I knew some of these questions were going to be pretty easy. So anyway, if for people who are car guys or girls, maybe they got it from the car clue, and if so, good for you.
Yeah, good for them. Okay, so next week, Eric, it's your turn to nominate a movie. Now we try to relate our films. So this week I went obviously with Cannonball Run. So what have you got for us next week?
Well, I figured Cannonball Run is a movie about a race, like a car chase across vast countryside. So I thought, I know the perfect modern movie that's essentially a 2-hour car chase. It's perfect. We're going to do Mad Max Fury Road. And then I thought, crap, we already did that one. So
we did do that one. Yeah, you're right.
We did, yes. So as much as that would have been the perfect go-to from this movie,
right?
I was like, damn it, that one's already been done. And then I thought, well, I'll look for a movie that maybe stars some of the same cast members. But honestly, most of the cast in this did their best work in the 70s. And I try to pick my movies substantially later, into the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s at least.
Right.
And honestly, most of the people in this were way past their prime. or dead by the time, in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I really sort of had my hands tied with this one. So I'm going to go again, this is a little leap of logic to get where we're going here. Okay. So I'm going to get you to watch the movie Unstoppable from 2010. It's by one of my favorite directors, Tony Scott. And this is a movie. I've mentioned this movie a few times. So this movie is about a runaway train and the conductors in a subsequent train that basically try and catch the runaway train. So it is essentially about two trains racing after each other on a time clock. They've got to get there. Climatic ending. Again, it's a little bit of a leap to connect these two movies, but I think this one's about, it's the speed, it's the chase, it's all the elements that go with it. So that's how we're very loosely connecting these movies. This was Tony Scott's last film before he unfortunately took his own life due to depression. It stars Denzel Washington and Chris Pine. Chris Pine, of course, you may or may not remember, is the new Captain Kirk in the reboot of Star Trek.
Oh, yeah, we watched that one.
Yeah, it also stars Rosario Dawson and a few other people that you're going to go, oh, I totally know that guy. It's got a lot of that guys in here. And it's a fun movie. I really enjoy this movie. It didn't score exceptionally well on the IMDb, but, you think, how's a movie about a runaway train all that exciting? I've probably seen this movie 10 times, and let me tell you, it comes on TV. I'm watching it 11th time. I really enjoy this one. I don't know if you're going to like it or not, but you should have no problem finding it. It's relatively new. Unstoppable from 2010, Tony Scott. We'll come back next week, and we'll give it a review.
Definitely. It won't be as hard to find as the Cannonball Run.
No,
sure.
Not at all. Did not have any problems finding this film.
All right,
and I was thinking about it. If my math's correct, this is going to be our third Tony Scott. We did Man on Fire.
Yes.
And we did True Romance.
Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
this will be our third one. And I'm sure we'll do Beverly Hills Cop 2 at some point, maybe Top Gun at some point. Tony Scott's got a lot of great credits to his name. I'm sure this won't be our last Tony Scott film. So next week we'll come back. We'll do our third Tony Scott film. We'll review Unstoppable.
Sounds good. I don't know if we've done any other directors 3 times. Maybe Spielberg. I don't know.
There's a few. There's a few that we've hit a couple of times. But yeah. I'm doing my part. We're gonna watch. Watch another Tony Scott one.
Like I say, I've never seen it, so we'll come back next week. We'll do Unstoppable. And until then, this is Chris McBride for Derek Myers saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.